Did you know that your dog could help save another dog's life? That's what was happening this Sunday at a blood drive for dogs in Mississauga, Ontario. It's not just humans that are reaping the benefits of advances in medical technology. Today, your pet can be treated for almost anything, for a price, of course. Joining us with a closer look is Ian Sandler, veterinarian at Rosedale Animal Hospital. Thank you so much for being here.
Good morning.
Okay, do you think the average person would be surprised at the medical options for pets out there right now?
For sure.
Yeah.
And in fact, they're surprised, even dog owners, until they actually need the care. So things seem quite routine in terms of sort of going to your veterinarian for, you know, the usual annual stuff such as vaccines, deworming, flea and heartworm medications. But when they get sick, sadly, pets tend to get really, really sick. And that's oftentimes when they need either specialized care or specialists to handle the situation.
So where exactly are we in terms of this level of specialized care? Are we getting to the point where if we can treat a human being, we can probably treat a pet?
We're pretty close. There's a lot of things that sort of start to interrupt that decision process. Obviously, economics is a big one. So we certainly see things like chemotherapy, advanced surgical procedures, anything that you could get in a human hospital. For the most part, you can typically now get from your veterinarian or some of the specialists that handle that kind of care.
Okay, so let's focus on that cost then. Let's say I'm one of those people who has an average-sized dog, and they're diagnosed with cancer. How much could I expect to pay for treatment?
So if it's something like chemotherapy, for example, lymphatic cancer or lymphoma, it could be anywhere from $3,000 up to around $10,000 for treatment, depending on the drugs and how they do in terms of the protocol. So oftentimes people look at what is the cost and what is the benefit. Also, quality of life is huge. So people will look at that. Now, the nice thing is with things like chemotherapy, oftentimes dogs don't typically, and cats for that matter, get the same kind of side effects that people will get. So you don't typically see, a lot of hair loss. You won't see vomiting and diarrhea to the same extent that you typically will see with people.
It must be interesting to be a veterinarian these days, because prior to these advances, the decisions were kind of cut and dried when it came to your dog getting sick with a terminal illness. And that discussion with a pet parent was hard to have, but it was a simple conclusion to get to. We have to do something with this pet. We have to put the pet down. That's not the discussion anymore. Are you finding that people in your field have to learn a new bedside manner?
It's a great question. What we're seeing still for veterinarians is it's a very tough job that we have, because typically speaking, if you're a human and you have disease X, when you go into the hospital, there's a standard treatment that you will get. Oftentimes, we have to work around things like finances, people's sort of moral concerns around, am I going to treat, am I not going to treat? Typically, rural and urban also has a very different slant. And for a lot of young Canadians now, pets are their kids. So for many individuals that are married or single, their pet tends to be their child if they're, if they're young and sort of looking for that kind of connection. The pet really has become part of their family in a very different way than it was 20 years ago.
Are you surprised with the lengths pet parents will go to save their pet?
It's such an individual basis. So, people's perception of what's too much, I think sometimes, we've got to be careful how we judge that. The way I look at it always is, what is the problem? What is the disease? What is the situation? How can we fix it? And what is that pet's quality going to be after?
Well, that's what I was going to ask, because doctors are governed by the Hippocratic Oath. Veterinarians don't have that same standard, but there are parallels. I have to assume that at some point there are some desperate pet parents that come in that need to be reined in a little bit to say the quality of life that you're chasing for your pet is unattainable. And that you have to make a really hard decision. Those must be very difficult conversations.
And I think that they are, but they happen more often than I think people will realize in many ways. And certainly if you look at sort of where legislation is moving in Canada in terms of end-of-care life for people, I think veterinarians in many ways have kind of led the way with this.
Yes.
So I do think we look at options and helping pets, when they're young and old. So I can see dogs that come in, for example, that are 1 or 2 that have been hit by a car. They may need, $5,000 or $10,000 worth of surgery, ICU care, stabilization. But if they can go on and live a really happy, healthy life, oftentimes pet owners will say, okay, I'm prepared to do that.
I just want to touch on insurance right before we go, because I have to assume that that's a byproduct of this. Is insurance a very real thing in the world of pet medicine?
It is, and it's a peace of mind thing. Yeah. So the problem with insurance is it's very similar to car insurance, meaning that you can spend quite a lot on a monthly premium, and then when you claim, your premiums go up. But my recommendation is always consider insurance, because it is peace of mind and it gives you coverage, so it gives you choice.
Ian Sandler, thank you so much for being here today.
Nice to be here.